When my brother stole my identity to buy a house, he said it was no big deal since we were family. I didn't report him. I fixed my credit in silence and waited. 15 years later, the same house went into foreclosure, and he found out the new owner was me. The look on his face when I evicted him said everything. I know Reddit loves a good revenge story, but this one didn't start as revenge. It started with stupidity, trust, and that kind of blind loyalty you only give to family. I'm 42 now, but when this all went down, I was 27, broke, and stupidly hopeful that family actually meant something. My brother, Jake, was 3 years older. He was always the golden child growing up, smooth talker, charismatic, always had some big plan that never quite worked out. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the one who followed rules, saved receipts, and kept a stable job while he chased opportunities. I think deep down, my parents always expected me to clean up after his messes. That dynamic never really went away. When this story started, Jake was married with a kid on the way. He'd been talking about wanting to build something real for his family. I respected that. I really did. So when he came to me one night, saying he needed help with his credit so he could qualify for a mortgage, I didn't think much of it. He spun it like this. Bro, the bank just needs another name on the file for the approval. It's just paperwork. You won't actually owe anything. You're just like a co-signer. And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe my brother had changed. I didn't know he'd already taken out a line of credit in my name 6 months earlier. I didn't know he'd maxed it out. I didn't know he'd already forged my signature on more than one document. I found out the hard way. A year later, I applied for a small personal loan to fix my truck, and the bank guy looked at me like I was trying to scam him. My credit score was in the low 500s. Apparently, I had missed payments on a mortgage I didn't even know existed. That night, I went straight to Jake's house. I didn't even knock. I walked in and said, "What the hell did you do?" He didn't even look up from his couch. He just sighed like I was being dramatic. Relax, man. It's not that deep. I just used your name for the paperwork. You know banks. They're uptight about credit and all that. You'll be fine. You used my name? Jake, that's fraud. He shrugged. Come on, you're my brother. You act like I stole from a stranger. Family helps each other out. That line. Family helps each other out. He said it like it was a moral code, like I was the one being selfish. I was so furious I couldn't even speak. My hands were shaking. I remember his wife standing in the kitchen, silent, pretending to wash dishes that were already clean. She knew. Of course she knew. I thought about calling the cops that night. My best friend, Ryan, told me I should. He said, if it were anyone else, you'd have them locked up by now. But it was my brother, and I couldn't bring myself to make that call. I thought about our parents, about our childhood, about the way mom would have cried if she knew her sons were fighting over something like this. So I didn't report him. I just fixed it, quietly. I spent years rebuilding my credit, calling banks, disputing charges, and proving over and over that I wasn't the one who made those transactions. It was humiliating. Every lender treated me like I was lying. Meanwhile, Jake was living large in that house, the one he bought with my name. 15 years passed. We didn't talk much after that night. He'd call occasionally around the holidays, always trying to sound like nothing happened. I kept my distance. I had my own life to rebuild. Got married. Started a small construction business. Worked my ass off. Then, last year, I got a letter from a local bank about a foreclosure auction. Normally, I'd toss that kind of mail. But the address looked familiar. Real familiar. It was Jake's house. At first, I just sat there staring at the envelope. I couldn't believe it. He'd lost the house. The same house he stole from me to get. And that's when the idea hit me. Not out of spite. Not at first. Just curiosity. I wanted to see how far gone things were. So I drove out there one weekend. It was in worse shape than I expected. Paint peeling, roof sagging, lawn overgrown. It looked nothing like the house I remembered. But when I saw the auction notice pinned to the door, something inside me just clicked. I had the money now. My business had done well. My credit was spotless. I could buy it, legitimately. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't tell anyone. Not my wife, not my parents, not Jake. I just handled the paperwork, closed the deal, and waited for the day he'd find out. He didn't even notice at first. Probably assumed the new owner would be some faceless investor. But when he got the eviction notice with my name on it, let's just say the silence on the other end of the phone that day was worth 15 years of swallowing my anger. He said my name once. You? Like he couldn't even believe it. I didn't say much. Just told him the legal deadline to move out. He begged, then yelled, then cried, said he had nowhere to go, said I couldn't do this to family. That word again. Family. I told him, you did this to yourself 15 years ago. And I hung up. He didn't move out on time. So I went down there myself. And when he opened the door and saw me standing on the porch, holding the eviction papers in my hand, he didn't even try to speak. The look on his face said everything. Jake didn't say a word that first minute. Just stood there in his dirty t-shirt, eyes sunken, hair unkempt, like life had chewed him up and spat him out. His wife wasn't around anymore. She'd left years ago, from what I heard. His daughter, who used to call me Uncle Danny when she was little, was probably in college by now. Time had done its damage. I handed him the paper and said, "You've got 2 weeks." He looked down at it, then back up at me. "You can't be serious." I didn't flinch. It's not personal. It's business. That line, I'd waited 15 years to say it. Because that's exactly what he'd told me back then when I confronted him about ruining my credit. He'd laughed, leaned back on his couch, and said, "It's just business, man. Chill." Now, I could see him replaying that moment in his head. His jaw tightened. He knew. He muttered something under his breath like, "You've been waiting for this, haven't you?" I didn't respond, just turned and walked back to my truck. But the thing about revenge, even poetic, justified revenge, is that it doesn't come with peace. Not right away. That drive home felt heavy. My chest was tight. The radio was playing some old Springsteen song, and it hit me how far apart our lives had drifted. 15 years ago, I would have killed to see him get what he deserved. But standing there now, watching him crumble, part of me felt sad. Not forgiving, just sad. When I got home, my wife, Melissa, noticed I was quiet. She's the type who can read me like a book. She asked what was wrong, and I told her the truth. Well, most of it. I told her I'd bought a property at foreclosure and that the previous owner turned out to be my brother. I didn't tell her why I'd done it. Not yet. She frowned. "You evicted your own brother?" I nodded slowly. She was quiet for a long time, then said, "He must have done something really bad." "Yeah," I said. "He did." I didn't sleep that night. I just kept thinking about the kid I used to look up to. Jake wasn't always this way. When we were little, he was my hero. He taught me how to ride a bike, snuck me candy before dinner, covered for me when I broke Mom's vase. But somewhere along the line, he figured out he could talk his way out of anything, and I became his safety net. That next week, he called me twice a day, sometimes angry, sometimes begging. His tone would swing like a pendulum, guilt tripping 1 minute, pleading the next. "Danny, you can't just throw me out, man. This is my home. My whole life is here. Jake, you threw me out of my life 15 years ago when you stole my name." He'd pause every time I said that, like he didn't want to admit it. I made a mistake. I was young, dumb. I had a family to think about. And I didn't. You think you were the only one who mattered. Come on, it was years ago. You've got your life together now. You're doing great. Why take it out on me now? That was the moment I realized he still didn't get it. He wasn't sorry about what he did. He was sorry he got caught. I kept it professional, texted him reminders about deadlines, about paperwork. The sheriff's office had a date to enforce the eviction if he didn't move out voluntarily. I gave him every chance to leave on his own terms. He didn't take it. The day the deputies showed up, I stayed back. I didn't want to see it, but Jake made sure I did. He called me, screaming through the phone as they loaded his stuff into a moving truck. "You're pathetic," he shouted. "You think this makes you better than me? You're just as cold as the people who turned their backs on us growing up." I didn't say anything. I just let him vent until he ran out of words. Then I said quietly, "The difference is, I learned from it." He hung up. After that, I didn't hear from him for weeks. Then one day, I drove by the property again. It was empty, quiet. The yard was cleaned up, his car was gone. Just like that, 15 years of unfinished anger felt finished. I spent the next few months renovating the place. It was strange walking through those rooms, knowing how much pain was tied to those walls. I replaced the floors, fixed the roof, repainted every inch. It wasn't about the property anymore. It was about taking something broken and making it whole again. Something that had once been used against me now belonged to me completely. One afternoon, while I was clearing out the attic, I found a box labeled "Old Stuff." Inside were photos, family ones. Jake, his wife, their kid, even a few from when we were kids. There was one of us sitting on our dad's truck, covered in mud, both grinning like idiots. I sat on the floor holding that photo for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt this weird ache in my chest. Because despite everything, despite all the lies, he was still my brother. And part of me wished it didn't have to end this way. But the part of me that had his credit destroyed, his life derailed, his trust shattered, that part knew it had to. A few months later, I rented out the house to a young couple. First-time homeowners. The kind of people Jake used to pretend he was. Sometimes I drive by, and the place looks alive again. Kids playing in the yard. Flowers by the porch. It doesn't erase the past, but it feels like the house finally got its second chance. As for Jake, I didn't hear from him for almost a year. Until one day, he called again. His voice quieter this time, older, almost tired. "Danny," he said, "can we meet?" And against my better judgment, I said yes. Because some things, even after everything, deserve an ending. We met at a diner off Route 9, the kind of place that hasn't changed since the 80s. Cracked vinyl booths, the smell of burnt coffee, and a waitress who's probably seen every kind of heartbreak pass through her tables. I got there early, sat in the corner booth facing the door. When Jake walked in, I barely recognized him. He looked smaller, not physically, but in that way people do when life's been pressing down on them for too long. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He spotted me, gave this awkward half-smile, and walked over. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey." We sat in silence for a minute. He kept stirring his coffee, even though he hadn't added anything to it. "I didn't know if you'd come," he finally said. "I almost didn't," I admitted. He nodded, eyes fixed on the table. "I don't blame you." I waited. I wasn't going to make it easy for him. He sighed, rubbed his face, and said, "I know I screwed up. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything. But I needed to tell you face to face that I was wrong." His voice cracked on that last word, and for the first time in a long time, I believed he actually meant it. "I didn't realize how bad I messed you up until it happened to me," he said. "Couple years ago, I tried to get a small loan to start a repair business. Turns out someone used my social security number, racked up a bunch of credit cards, ran off with the money. Took me forever to prove it wasn't me. Felt like karma." I sat back, arms crossed. "You're saying that made you understand?" He nodded. "Yeah, I used to think what I did was just paperwork, like it didn't really hurt anyone. But having my name dragged through the mud, being treated like trash by banks, landlords, everyone. Man, I finally got it." He looked up, eyes glassy. "I hurt you. I know that now." For a second, I didn't know what to say. I'd waited 15 years to hear him say those words, and now that he had, it didn't feel satisfying. It just felt heavy. "I don't hate you, Jake," I said finally. "But you destroyed a lot. Not just my credit. My trust. My family." "I know," he whispered. "Mom and Dad still won't talk to me. Not since they found out." That caught me off guard. "They found out." He nodded. "After the eviction, I had to explain why I lost the house. I told them everything. Mom cried for 2 days. Dad said I was no son of his." He laughed bitterly. "Guess I earned that one." I didn't say anything. He leaned forward, voice trembling. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to do better. Got a job at a mechanic shop. Been sober for a year." "Sober?" I asked, surprised. "Yeah," he said, looking down. "After the divorce, I went off the rails. Started drinking, gambling. You name it. Losing the house was rock bottom. But maybe I needed that. Maybe that's what it took to wake up." The silence between us stretched. The waitress came by, refilled our coffees, gave us a sympathetic smile like she could sense the history hanging between us. After a while, Jake asked, "Do you ever think about us? Before everything went to hell." "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly when I find old photos. We were good kids once." He smiled faintly. "Yeah. Remember that time we built that stupid tree house? Fell apart in a week because you used duct tape instead of nails." He laughed, and for the first time in decades, it sounded genuine. For a split second, it felt like we were those kids again, before money, before resentment, before betrayal. But the moment passed. He wiped his mouth with a napkin and said, "I wanted to ask, what did you do with the house?" "I fixed it up," I said. "Rented it out to a young family." He smiled a little. "Good. I'm glad it's getting a second chance." Then his voice softened. "Kind of like me, I guess." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I could tell he wasn't the same man who'd laughed in my face 15 years ago. Life had done its punishment better than I ever could. "I hope so," I said. When we walked out, he extended his hand. For a second, I hesitated, then shook it. His grip was weak, but his eyes said what words couldn't. "Take care of yourself, Jake," I said. "You too, Danny." He walked away, shoulders hunched, disappearing into the parking lot. I sat in my truck for a while before driving off, staring at my reflection in the windshield. I thought that would be the end of it. But a month later, I got a letter. No return address. Just my name on the front in shaky handwriting I instantly recognized. Inside was a note and a folded photograph. The note said, "You were right to hate me, but thank you for giving me the chance to make peace. I'm checking into rehab again. Don't worry, not running this time. I'm gonna make something of what's left of my life. Maybe we'll talk again someday. Love, Jake." The photo was the same one I'd found in the attic. Us on Dad's truck, covered in mud, smiling like idiots. I didn't know how he got it. Maybe he'd come back for it. Maybe fate just wanted me to have it. I put it on my desk at home, right next to a framed picture of my wife and kids. Sometimes I catch myself staring at it when the house is quiet, wondering what might have happened if he hadn't made that one decision all those years ago. Wondering if there was ever a version of us that got to stay brothers without all the wreckage. But life doesn't give do-overs. It gives you choices and consequences. And sometimes, the only justice you get is knowing you survived it. Still, a part of me hoped he'd call again someday. Because even after everything, he was still my brother. Months passed after that diner meeting. Jake didn't call again, and I didn't reach out. Part of me wanted to see if he could actually keep it together, if he could take that first small step toward fixing himself without me hovering over every move. And honestly, I was tired. Tired of holding anger in my chest. Tired of checking my phone every time he might have texted. Tired of letting the past dictate how I slept at night. Life moved on. My business grew. Melissa and I bought a bigger house. Our kids were thriving, messy, and loud, and the chaos felt like the kind of grounding I'd needed for 15 years. The house I'd bought from foreclosure? It became a symbol for something I'd rarely allowed myself to admit: control. I finally had control over a part of my life that had been ripped away in my 20s, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. Then one rainy Thursday afternoon, I got a call that shook me in a way I wasn't expecting. It was a woman, a realtor I hadn't spoken to in years. Her tone was clipped, professional, but there was an edge to it. "Danny, this is Sandra. I know you own the property on Maple Street. There's someone trying to file a claim on it. Says they're family." I froze. My brain raced. Family? Only one person could make that kind of claim: Jake. "Who is it?" I asked carefully. "His name's Jake. Your brother." I could hear it in her voice. She didn't need to explain further. I had already imagined this. I'd spent years waiting for the right moment to teach him a lesson, and now it seemed like karma was giving him one last shot at redemption or humiliation. I didn't hesitate. "Cancel the claim," I said. "Legally, it's mine. All paperwork is in order. You don't need to do anything else." But the seed was planted. I realized I could end this in the most concrete way possible. Not just eviction, not just winning legally. I could make him fully understand the consequences of his own choices. So I did some digging. Turns out, after the rehab stint he mentioned in his note, Jake had bounced between low-paying jobs, missed a few child support payments, and eventually defaulted on some small personal loans. His name kept popping up in public records connected to liens, judgments, and overdue accounts. And then I found it. The same house he'd taken my name to buy 15 years ago, the house that had become a slow-motion nightmare for him after the foreclosure, was still the center of his life's chaos. I made a plan, not out of hate anymore, but out of a strange sense of closure. I would show him that choices had consequences, that the little betrayals he thought were harmless were the kind of poison that eventually comes back around. A week later, I got an anonymous tip that he was squatting in a friend's old apartment, using someone else's identity to rent it. Perfect. I hired a lawyer to handle everything by the book. The eviction notices went out. Every step was legal, precise. No yelling, no shouting, just law and paperwork. The day the deputies showed up, I stood back, watching from the corner of the street. Jake tried to fight it, of course. Begged, pleaded, cajoled. He even threw in some guilt lines about family, about forgiveness. But he wasn't my responsibility anymore. The law was the law, and he'd crossed every line 15 years ago. When the deputies handed him the notice, his face fell. He stared at me across the street, and for the first time, I noticed real fear in his eyes. Not anger, not bravado, just raw, unfiltered fear. I wanted to feel satisfaction, but it was more complicated than that. Watching him, I realized that life had already done most of the work for me. He was smaller than I remembered, weaker, older. Life had chipped away at the arrogance and charm he'd used to manipulate everyone around him. And I wasn't the one who had delivered the final blow. I was just the witness to it. After the deputies left, I walked to my truck and watched him gather his things. A moving truck from a charity organization was taking his stuff to a shelter, and I noticed he didn't even glance at me. Maybe he was ashamed. Maybe he finally realized he had no one left to charm. I went home that evening and sat on my porch with a beer, thinking about everything. 15 years of planning, of waiting, of rebuilding my life after he tried to ruin it, and now it was over. The house was mine. He was gone. Justice, in a way, had been served. But even with the sense of victory, there was something heavier lingering. I kept thinking about the boy who had once been my hero, the brother I had looked up to. He was gone too. What was left was just a man who had made bad choices and lived with the consequences. And somewhere deep down, I realized that maybe the real victory wasn't eviction or winning the house or proving a point. Maybe the victory was surviving it all. Surviving him. Surviving the anger, the betrayal, the helplessness, and still coming out intact. Still being able to look at myself in the mirror and know that, despite everything, I didn't lose myself. That night, I went inside, sat down with Melissa, and finally let myself relax. I told her every detail, from the first stolen credit card to the final eviction. She didn't say much, just listened, letting me get it all out. And when I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than he ever was," she said. And for the first time in years, I believed it. It's strange how quiet life feels after you close a chapter that's been open for 15 years. I kept expecting some leftover tension, some random message from Jake, or even a call from our parents with their usual guilt-laden questions. But nothing came. The house stayed quiet, the foreclosure settled, and my life, well, my life just kept moving forward. A few months after the eviction, I decided to check the records again, just out of curiosity. Part of me wanted to see if Jake had tried to fight it in any legal loopholes. Spoiler, he hadn't. He was gone. The house was fully mine. But then I noticed something that made me pause. There was a small lien filed under his name from a creditor. A minor thing, but enough to tell me he was still struggling, still scrambling to survive. I didn't feel satisfaction this time. I felt pity. It hit me that he'd spent all these years running from the consequences of his actions. He'd never really learned, never really rebuilt. And I couldn't fix that for him. That was his life to manage, just like it had always been mine. A few weeks later, out of the blue, I got a message from Jake. Short, simple, just 3 words. "I'm sorry, Danny." I stared at it for a long time before responding. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could tell him off, lecture him, ignore him, all justified. But instead, I typed, "I know. I hope you're actually working on fixing things." No reply. And that was fine. The funny thing about all this is how much it changed me. I wasn't the same naive guy who let his brother ruin his life. I wasn't the quiet, rule-following sibling who bent over backward for family. I had learned how to protect myself, how to rebuild from the wreckage someone else caused, and most importantly, how to let go of the anger without forgetting. The house became more than just a symbol of revenge. It became proof that I could take the worst situation, the worst betrayal, and turn it into something solid. I didn't just reclaim property. I reclaimed control. I reclaimed peace. And in that sense, the eviction, the foreclosure, the 15 years of planning, all of it, was more about my life than his. Sometimes, when the wind rustles through the old maple trees in the yard, I think about what could have been. I think about the brother I once looked up to, the family we were supposed to be. But those are just thoughts. I don't dwell on them. I've learned that some things can't be repaired, and some people can't change. All you can do is survive, rebuild, and keep moving. Jake? I don't know where he is now. Last I heard, he was trying to stay clean, maybe starting over again somewhere far from the mess he made of his life. I hope he finds his footing. I really do. But if he doesn't, that's not on me anymore. I'm still me. I've still got my family, my business, my life. I still get frustrated. I still get angry, but I don't let it define me anymore. And every time I walk through that house, every time I see it alive again with tenants who actually respect it, I think about the journey it took to get here. 15 years of anger, betrayal, and waiting, All for the moment where the house wasn't just reclaimed, it was healed. And in a way, so was I. Life doesn't hand out perfect revenge or closure. It hands out consequences. And sometimes, surviving them, thriving despite them, is the most satisfying justice you'll ever get. And yeah, seeing Jake's face the day I evicted him, that was just a bonus. If you made it all the way to the end, thanks for sticking with me. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the story, consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. It helps me share more stories like this. Thanks.